Go. Hey everybody, welcome to Mindset Reset Chats with me and Rachelle, and today we have a very special guest joining us through Zoom. We've got the lovely Jess Stuart, five-time author, TEDx speaker, coach, and just all-round amazing human being, and her latest book, Burnout to Brilliance, Rachelle and I have just loved so much that we asked Jess to come along and just share a little bit of some of her expertise and insights, and help all of you take a little bit from that so that you can have a little bit more brilliance in your lives, and see how that helps. So welcome, Jess. We're so excited to have you here. We're going to do our very best to not run over time. We'll see how we go. But yeah, so I guess, shall we pass it over to you to perhaps tell us a little bit of a story about your journey to why, this well-being, and why you've even written a book called Burnout to Brilliance, and why all of this stuff is so important to you.
Yeah, sure. Kia ora koutou. Thank you for having me. I'm just recovering from COVID, so excuse the croakiness that's still left in the voice. But Burnout to Brilliance really has grown from my own journey. So my background is in human resources. So I've worked for corporates. I've always worked with people. I always had a passion for seeing people grow and develop. But as part of my work, I saw a lot of burnout as well. And I was also part of that, being on the treadmill, trying to always do more, be more, gain promotions, work all the hours I could. And in the end, I burnt out. And for me, that was really the catalyst for stepping away from my HR career, from the corporate world, and going, well, what's next? What's a different way of doing this? How do I take the things that I love and support people to be their best, but without it having to come with this side of burnout, or without it having to come with an empty tank that when we get home, we've got nothing to share with our families, friends, and our social life. And so for me, that resulted, when I left my corporate career, resulted in a year of kind of research, really, me trying to A, recover from burnout, and B, figure out a plan B. What does this look like? And so I was lucky enough to travel to northern Thailand, where I taught English to Buddhist monks, and I went to the Kingdom of Bhutan, who operate gross national happiness in place of GDP as a way of measuring their country's progress. And I was learning all this cool stuff around this ancient Eastern wisdom that I wanted to pair with our Western psychology way of doing things in a way that helped us be our best without burning out in the process. So I started writing books, I started sharing what I was learning, and Burnout to Brilliance is kind of the fifth iteration along that line. So yeah, that's my story. That's kind of how it all came to be. Of course, managing my own business for the last 5 or 6 years as well has added to that challenge and given me a new way of appreciating when there is so much to do, how do you do it effectively, as opposed to spreading ourselves so thin across so many things and then not doing any of them very well.
Yeah. So obviously, everyone should go read your book, and there's tons of tips in there. But on that, because I think, especially when you've come from a corporate background, you've been surrounded by other experts who have done other parts of it, and so you can just focus in your zone of excellence. And I see in the work that I do with business owners, that's a real struggle for people, is you've gone from being this expert to now you've got to wear 17 other hats, and you're, excuse language, you're a bit shit at those other hats, right? So how have you found that balance, and that doing all the stuff without setting back on a path to burnout? Because that's also, it's a very easy trap to fall into when you're self-employed, isn't it?
Oh, it totally is. And the irony of this journey for me has been that the reason I left the corporate world was because I wanted freedom and time and to be my own boss. And then the first thing I did in the first year or two of my business is give all that away. And like the autonomy and freedom that I wanted was the thing I was sacrificing day in, day out, for exactly that reason that you've explained. You have to wear all the hats. You're setting up your website, you're doing your accounts, you're not just doing the thing you went into business to do, and you spread yourself so thin as a result. And I think in the early days, the reality is, for so many of us, and to be able to leverage that freedom and get more autonomy going forward. So for me, it was about focusing on what the priorities were. What are the things I'm going to invest my time in? that'll be of most value to my business. And of course, for me now, that's delivery, that's writing books, that's doing this stuff, as opposed to doing my accounts and scheduling my Facebook posts. And so as time went on, it was, well, who can support me with this? How can I delegate this? What can I let go of that either doesn't get done or gets done by somebody else, so that I can really focus on what the priorities are and really give myself permission to work my business in a way that works for me. So I generally don't have meetings before 9 o'clock, because that's when I'm kind of doing yoga, going for a walk, doing all the things that fuel me, so that when I do my meetings, I'm in a better space and have more energy. And then if I want to go to the beach at 2 p.m. because the surf's up, then great. And I catch up later after dinner on some of the emails that I wanted to get done today. So it's having that balance. But I think, particularly if you come from the corporate world, we are indoctrinated into the 9 to 5, and they're always working as many hours as possible. And of course, in our own business, that becomes more the case. And so being able to give ourselves permission to still have that freedom and autonomy, I think, is really important, because that's one of the best things about being in business for yourself. And we shouldn't give that up.
Yeah.
That's right. It's one of the key reasons we all go into business. We want that freedom. And then you get tied into your business and you find that you don't have it. And I love how you mentioned in your book that we generally have deprioritized balance, rest, and downtime. We've put that to the side in place of growing our business and doing all the things that we think we should do, and not actually filling our own cups first, which is just amazing.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's one of our biggest Achilles heels, I think, and not just in our own businesses either, because we've been, we have busy as this glorified marker of our success almost, that we wear like a badge of honor. And so the opposite of busy, to take time out, to take rest, to have those pauses in our day, we almost see now as unproductive or lazy in some way. And we can feel a bit guilty or selfish when we're doing that stuff. But this flipped for me totally when I had my own burnout, because instead of it becoming a luxury indulgence that is a bit lazy and unproductive, it became the foundation that I need to be my best. So if I don't get those pauses, that rest, that downtime, I know that I can't do any of the other stuff to the best of my ability. So instead of it being a pause and a kind of, nice to have, I'm not really doing anything productive, it becomes the most productive part of my day, because it powers me to do everything else that I need to do, whether that be thinking and ideas or the actual doing and the delivery that we need the energy for. So that flip really helped me prioritize that stuff, because you're right, otherwise it just becomes this thing we think is not really very useful, and we should be being productive and maximizing every second of the day. But I think we often overlook some of the most important parts of that, and that is getting ourselves the energy in the first place.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we do our best work when we're feeling positive and we're feeling happy. Our brains are wired to be at the best when we're in that state. So by giving ourselves that permission to have time to put ourselves in that state, all of a sudden the rest of your day becomes so much more productive. Everything you make better decisions, you're more switched on. Everything you do is working smarter, not harder. So it's a win-win, isn't it?
Yeah.
So Jess, you obviously had like a big reset moment with the burnout, which that's one way of creating self change. But for others who might be looking at, well, how do I just tiptoe into this? Like, how could I do this without needing to travel to Southeast Asia? And because that sounds amazing, but I don't think my kids are going to let me do it. Have you got any tips with the people that you work with, or with the research that you've done, on how you can tippy-toe your way into this without the need for a big reset?
Yeah, totally. And appreciate that, we don't all have to burn out and fall off the end of the cliff for this to become something we want to embark on, and B, we don't always have the ability to go traveling all over the world and pick up these tips. And yet there are so many cool principles we can draw back into our Western modern life in a way that still works. And I think one of these is around priorities and how we treat priorities. We do tend to live our lives like everything is one big emergency. And so we go from one emergency to the next, everything's urgent. We're in a constant state of stress and overwhelm. And when you look at the origins of the word priority, it was only ever supposed to be a singular. So it's existed since the 1400s, the word priority. It became priorities and a plural At about the same time, we had the Industrial Revolution. So no surprise there. And yet now we live in a world where we have 20 priorities for the week, and we were only ever supposed to have one. So we have to focus on the stuff that's important as opposed to treating everything like it's an emergency. And yes, there are some things that do come up, particularly with kids, dependents, our lives, that are emergencies, but not half as much as we think. And it's interesting to see, and I think in the book I used the analogy of my dog. I don't have kids, I have a dog. She's like my child. And if I'm in the office, doing my emails, busy, absorbed in my work, and she comes in with the ball and wants to play, generally I'll be like, no, now's not a good time, I'm busy. But if she came in with a nail in her foot that she'd just stepped on, of course I'd make time for it. It's an emergency. And yet we sometimes lose sight of the true emergencies, or we treat other people's emergencies as if they were our own, because we don't want to let them down, or we don't want them to think that we can't cope. And we say yes to everything. We try and be all things to all people. And then we don't leave enough time in the day for us, or we feel like we're spreading ourselves too thin and we're not getting the same satisfaction or achievement from what we're doing. So I think priorities is one piece, but the other is the stuff you mentioned about carving out those pauses in that downtime. I think for our brains, particularly, when we create, when we innovate, when we solve problems, when we have ideas, that's when our brains are still. And that's when they're in this space of being rather than doing. And we spend so much of our time doing that our brains can't access that space when they're in doing mode. And for me, some of the most impactful times in my week are when I'm sat in the spa and it looks like I'm doing nothing, but I have some of my best ideas in the spa, right? Because I'm relaxed.
Like the shower idea, right?
Yeah,
like,
the shower.
the blinders in the shower. Yeah,
totally. And so having this time where we are, for all intents and purposes on the surface, looks like we're doing nothing, we can actually be doing the most important thing of the week, because it's going to lead to the best idea or give us some innovation, creativity, or solution to a problem we've been mulling over for weeks that we wouldn't have had if we keep the brain in doing mode all of the time.
Yeah. So have you learned to value that because you've obviously seen the benefit in your own work and life? Or was it a little bit of I'm just going to have to take a leap of faith and just try this a few times and just try this sitting still thing and just see what happens? Like, how has that evolved for you? Because it sounds like it's now a relatively comfy outfit to put on. But for people who are trying that on for the first time, it could be a bit feel a bit awkward. So how did you experience that?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm a big believer in, I love to learn, and I look at different cultures. I read lots of books. I look to learn from others, but I'm a big believer in try it out and see if it works for you. That's the best way of take a little bit of everything you learn throughout your life and put it all together in a way that works for you, as opposed to, this is what I should do because it's what everybody on Instagram is doing. And for me, the biggest turning point was seeing the impact it had for me. So I was forced into being still because of burnout. But the silver lining in that was that in that stillness, there's a quote, a Ram Dass saying, the quieter you become, the more you can hear. And in that stillness, that forced stillness that I had recovering from burnout, all of a sudden I had this clarity that I'd never had in my life before. Clarity about my career, my business, the books that I would write, the impact I wanted to make in the world, how I wanted to live my life, the things that were important to me. It was like someone had lifted a fog from my eyes, and all of a sudden I could see this stuff really clearly. And not just the business side of stuff, and how I got a sense of meaning and purpose, but even life stuff. So I'd been in a relationship with a man for 7 years at that point, and we separated and I came out. And that was as a result of being so still and quiet that all of a sudden everything became obvious, and all of the areas in my life I'd been struggling with all fell into place in a way that I was like, well, why couldn't I see this before? So for me, when you get that value, it's like a no-brainer then. It's like, well, why wouldn't I do this every day? So for me, it's 10 minutes. I meditate in the morning. I sit, I be still. It doesn't have to look like that. It's about making the most of your moments. So it's finding a way to pause. So for some people, it's a gratitude practice. It's listening to relaxing music. It's sitting in the house with a cup of tea first thing in the morning before anybody else is up, to gather your thoughts and to be present. It's watching the sunset. It can look like a million different things, but it's finding a way that works for you, and a way of being present and quiet and still with yourself, to tap into that other part of us that gives us that clarity often and that creativity.
Yeah. So
Love that.
if you were giving advice to someone who was not needing to hit the massive reset button and just wanting to make a small change, where do you see and spot most people being able to easily find those moments of pause? Like, what's your observation sort of served you up in terms of watching other people's journey to find this space?
I think one of the easiest places to start looking is at our devices, because we live in a busy world, right? And we always say we don't have enough time. And there is a saying that you always find time, you always make time if it's important. And it's not that we don't have enough time, it's actually that we waste so much of it. And so if we took out of our lives Netflix, Facebook scrolling, social media surfing in any description, I reckon we would free up a huge amount of hours in our week. And that's not to say we should never do these things, because of course it's how we relax as well. And yet we can moderate. So these things have come into our life and evolved at such a rapid pace, and they are designed to be addictive and to draw our attention. And I think for many of us, and I'm no different, the habits with these devices are not always healthy, and they creep up in a way that we don't know until all of a sudden we do a digital detox one weekend and realize that we've got an extra 8 hours in the weekend that we didn't know we had. And so I think that's carving out those moments. So we used to have lots of momentary pauses in our day when we were waiting for the kettle to boil, or the lift to arrive at our floor, or the bus to arrive for our commute, or to the kids to come out of whatever class they've been in when we were picking them up. We'd have these moments where we'd be checking in with ourselves, and we'd be idling the brain, and we'd be pausing, or we'd be looking out the window and gazing off into the distance. And now we fill those moments with news headlines, filtered images of other people on Instagram that make us feel inferior, shopping discounts and offers that we get us thinking about things we want to buy because we don't feel enough as we are without buying them. We have all this stuff that comes into our mind that not only overloads an already busy brain, but can also change the way we feel about ourselves and think. And so they used to be our opportunities to pause. So I always say to someone, if you can find even 1 minute in your day to kind of just check in with yourself and breathe and press pause, it's a great starting point. And so finding those moments that work. And I think I talk in the book about the blocks of 20 minutes. So we have 72 blocks of 20 minutes to use every day. And granted, a lot of them will be asleep and they'll be taken up by bookings that we have in our schedule. But we also have often those 20-minute gaps between meetings or before we have to go and pick the kids up. And it's those 20-minute gaps that we can be starting a gratitude practice, or going for a walk around the block, or making ourselves a juice, whatever it looks like for you, getting your sort of dose of wellness. It's carving out those moments in your schedule and finding that time.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
that's so true. And
true.
one of the things that I watch people is they might, I don't know, start exercising or start something, but there is a default urge now that our clever devices do so much to latest podcast or an Audible or something, and losing that space to just take the dog for a walk without consuming anything, or to just sit in the car just driving and being a bit bored, you know. And so it creeps up in other ways, isn't it? That device kind of consumption. Here's some more stuff for your brain in case it didn't have enough leaking out the edges.
Yeah. And they're so busy places. I mean, and the beauty of our brain is that it literally controls everything that happens to us. So what we think becomes how we feel, and that becomes how we act. So everything starts in the brain. So if we've filled it with a whole heap of stuff that makes us feel inferior, or negative news stories, or just busyness and overwhelm, that's how we feel. And then the results that we start to get in our work and in our life are dictated by that, rather than coming from a place of what we actually feel and what we actually think when we cut through the noise, when we give ourselves time to calm the brain and actually see the wood for the trees.
Yeah, calming the brain is so true.
Yeah, and you've got a great quote in your book by Anne Lamott, is almost everything will work again when you unplug it for a few minutes, including you. And that just sums it up really, really nicely to say, you know, that's how we fix our devices and things, don't we? If something's not working, we unplug it, turn it off, turn it on again, and it works again. And the same goes for us. Same goes for us. And we come out of that a better person for it.
Yeah, for sure. It's a concept I talk about in terms of slowing down to speed up, because it sounds counterintuitive, right? To unplug, to slow down, to stop. But what it actually does for us is helps us speed up, because when we return to our life or our work, things don't take as long. We are more effective. We are sharper. We're more focused. We don't make as many mistakes. And so that's how we speed up, by first slowing down and pressing pause and unplugging for a bit.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant.
Do you, obviously this work is a practice, right? So, and because we're human, we have ebbs and flows. Do you find, have you learnt to spot your wobbles so that you can catch yourself before you slip back into it, because you live in the same society that we all do, with this cacophony of noise, right? So I'm imagining you two as a human have these ebbs.
Definitely.
What do you do? Like, can you catch yourself now, or do you have like a little like reset practice that you can kind of go like, oh Jess, hang on?
Yeah. And it's interesting, right? Because as high achievers, we're always driven to be doing. And that's part of how we succeed in our businesses. So I never want to take that away. But because we are capable of brilliance, we tend to expect it of ourselves all the time. And we don't always appreciate that we do have these ebbs and flows. So in the book, I talk about the seasons to our soul, that for me, I have way more energy in summer than I do in winter. I have way more energy in the mornings than I do in the evenings. I'm an introvert, so I recharge my energy, particularly when I've been out at conferences and workshops mixing with lots of people. I recharge my energy by being by myself, being in solitude. And so understanding how we work, because we're all different, then we can best respond to our natural rhythms. And of course, that goes well beyond that stuff as well, to particularly for women, the cycles that we have physiologically within ourselves. You know, we've talked recently about Lydia Ko and the impact on her performance by her periods, and that's something so basic that literally every woman understands, that at a certain time of the month I feel quite shit every month. And yet we have these expectations of ourselves that we're going to be brilliant every day, and when we're not, we beat ourselves up. And yet there are these seasons to our souls. So being able to meet ourselves where we're at, and part of being brilliant is also accepting our human flaws, that yes, we're capable of brilliance, but that will look different on different days, or during different seasons, or at different times of the day. So one of the things I like to do is check in with myself and do a bit of an energy audit. And it's almost like a mobile phone battery. If I had a little indicator on my forehead, like our mobile phones do, what number does it say? You know, am I 20% and on red and need plugging in? Or am I 80% and this day is going to be a good day and I should expect more of myself than the 20% days where I'm recovering from COVID and my brain's not quite working properly? So it's being able to meet ourselves where we're at, and just understand that we will have these peaks and troughs, and that's just the flow of being human. And when we know ourselves, we know what we can expect, and then we're less likely to beat ourselves up for not being perfect on the days where we're not brilliant.
Absolutely love that.
And I feel like sometimes that is easier said than done. I almost feel like there's kind of part of this work is then consciously designing how you live your life and what you choose to put in it, because if we run with the mainstream, we should, then those 168 hours that we've all got a week get consumed by everyone else's urgency, right? Have you got any tips for people around thinking about how they craft what a week looks like, so that there is space for brilliance on the dusty days?
Yeah. And it's a exercise that I do with some of my clients. We print out one of those blank outlook weeks and go, if you could design your ideal week, what does it look like? You know, do you have yoga in the morning? Do you finish at 3:00 on a Friday because you want to do X, Y, and Z? Or do you actually take a Friday off and work a 4-day week? So we look at what that looks like. And it doesn't mean that overnight their life changes, but what it means is they've got a plan to work to. This is what my ideal week looks like. So how do I make that happen? Particularly with the freedoms we have working for ourselves. So I think that's important, knowing what works for you in that space, and when you do your best work as well. Because for some people it might be that, you know, they have time off in the day because they like to work at night when the kids are in bed, because that's when they can be more focused, but also it's when their brain is more active. Whereas for me, my brain's asleep after 9 o'clock, so there's no point me logging on to my laptop because I won't do anything that's of any use.
I'm with you. Yeah. So
Yeah,
so obviously as self-employed business owners, we have that luxury or privilege of a little bit more conscious control. I know that you do a lot of work with corporates, and so people who are still in 9 to 5 structures and rhythms. Have you got any tips for, if you know, like if anyone's watching this or listening and is in that set of parameters? Have you got any tips for those who've got less fluidity and control?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, because when we work for someone else, we do have less autonomy. But having said that, post-COVID, work has never been as flexible as it is now, in terms of how much time we can work from home, what the expectations are around us being in an office, the times of day that we are present in an office. So I think we've got more flexibility than we used to have. So it's finding that flexibility within the structure you have. So that might be that you have to have 2 days in the office, but when you're working from home, you can structure that much easier. And as well as time and how we structure our schedule, there's other things that feed into that as well. So that could be our environment, setting our environment up for success. What does your home working environment look like? Do you have a nice space at home? Is it clean, tidy, well organized? Or is it a box on the kitchen table with the kids running around under your feet? How do you set your environment? It's taking control of the things we can control, right? And doing those in a way that works for us, knowing that, particularly if we work for someone else, there might be some things we don't have control over. So focusing on the bits we do control, and that might just be our environment, our office, our desk space, setting that up for success, or to help us achieve more focus or more brilliance.
And therefore giving yourself that pause time before work, after work, and during the middle of the day. I mean, we all have several breaks during the middle of the day, so taking those breaks, using those breaks wisely, and taking those moments to pause and reset so that you'll come back a better person for it.
Because it's too easy otherwise to get sucked into, you know, we are inherently people pleasers, and everybody else will always want something of us, so we overlay that with our own schedule, and we start to deprioritize taking our breaks because other people need things from us, whereas taking the breaks enable us to deliver for ourselves and other people in a better, more effective way. So it's flipping that switch in the mind as to how we approach that stuff, and our breaks then become non-negotiable, because we know that's going to fuel us to do all the stuff when we come back to work that we need to do, and probably make it not take as long, and make it a better quality as well.
Amazing. And then when we're having those breaks, perhaps thinking about exactly what we're doing in those breaks, and so far as we're picking up our devices and checking in with social media, or are we actually having a complete pause from the computer and from devices and going and doing something, going for a walk, or just having some own quiet mind time as well, which is helps so much with that, the way that you come back and the person that you come back as. Definitely.
I'm conscious of time, Jess. Is there anything that we should have asked you that you think people listening in or tuning in later just really need to grasp and take away from this conversation? Is there anything we perhaps didn't give you the chance to share your brilliant wisdom about?
No, not really. I think we've had a wonderful chat about some really important stuff, and hopefully it resonates with people. I think one of the things that's been resonating with the people I'm working with at the moment around busyness has been, and it's in the book, this types of busy, what drives our busyness. And for many of us, we can be busy for different reasons. Yes, the reality is we all live in busy worlds, and we have a lot of expectations placed upon us, and we never seem to find enough hours in the day. But we also find that busy can be driven sometimes from a place of lack and scarcity in ourselves, not just around time. Sometimes we are busy trying to prove ourselves because we don't feel confident in what we bring to the table, or we're busy comparing ourselves to others and then feeling like we have to do more to live up to the things that we see on social media that may not be real, or other people that might have been in business 5 years longer than us, but seem to be being more successful as a result. And then we compare ourselves and feel like we're falling short. So sometimes it's not just about the busyness itself and how we manage that, but understanding what drives our busyness. And if we can start curing some of that stuff around our confidence, the lack of need to compare to others, the appreciation that we're all on our own different journeys and therefore that all looks different, and that social media highlights may not be real. When we understand that stuff, there's less of this need then to over deliver and to always want to do more, be more, to bridge that gap, to fill that void. So I think that's sort of a food for thought that I'd like to leave people with. You know, we've talked about managing busyness and time, but we also need to think about why we want ourselves to be busy in the first place. What are we trying to prove, and where does that come from?
Yeah,
that's
so
fantastic.
true.
Love
Such a
that.
profound point to kind of end the conversation on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
So
amazing.
thank you so much for joining us, Jess. We will send
Pleasure.
out on the replay links to the website. So if anyone wants to get their hand on their book or join you in an upcoming book tour event, or just get in touch to say, because I know you've got tons of goodies on your website. We will be sharing that with everyone. But thank
Awesome.
you so much for joining us. It's been such a joy.
Yeah, it has.
Yeah.
It's just been amazing. We've got so many great takeaways from today. So what Alana will summarize in her amazing email she sends out to everyone. So just incredible. So thank you very, very much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Enjoyed chatting to you.
Awesome.
Thanks.